والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Being the death anniversary of our blessed Prophet, it is pertinent to talk of this great man and savior of humanity. Now, if you look at the situation of Arabia, then what do we need to change that situation and put the society back on a trajectory of growth and achieving its human potential? The ills were many. There was a lot of wrong there. As Jafar explains to the king Najashi when he went there and the king asked him, "What does this prophet teach you?" And the way Jafar explains that we were idolaters, he brought us to one God, superstitious, he instilled us with confidence, we honored no oaths or pledges, he taught us to behave morally. We had no care or concern for the rights of others or orphans. We stole, we warred. He taught us that peaceful, harmonious coexistence is most akin to our human nature. He has transformed us fully. Now, what sort of a person is required to bring about that sort of a shift and a paradigm change? And bear in mind that this prophet did not address one singular problem of his society. There were many, many problems. Social inequality, injustice, exploitation, no care for humanity, no sense of rights of others, superstition, and no confidence within the self. He did not address singular part of the problem. He addressed the ills in their entirety. But what sort of a person was needed to achieve such a grand task and such total transformation and a shift of paradigm so fully? You see, you need a special sort of a person there, a person who has the right qualities. Now, the Blessed Prophet's heart was not softened by the wahi. He already had a very soft heart. He wasn't someone in whom morality was instilled by the revelation. He always stood at the peak of morality. He wasn't somebody whose heart was nurtured in care for human community. He was already very caring. He wasn't a person who was thrown into the depths of revelation of the truth. He was a mind that was always yearning and seeking deeper truths. So in a way, the Blessed Prophet had the right credentials before he was ordained as the Prophet. The Quran says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ لَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. It is due to the mercy of God that you are kind to them. Had you been hard-hearted and harsh, they would have fled from your midst. The Prophet was already a soft-hearted person. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. He already stood at the peaks of moral conduct. He was already a person who had care for the people around him, to the extent that the Quran says on so many occasions, do not despair on their state. The Quran consoled him, we know what we are doing. Deliver your message. Obviously, the Quran had the insight that the Prophet could never have had. So the Quran said, we know what we are doing by the harsh commandments that we are giving you. On many occasions, the Prophet, as we read the Quran, did feel that he should mellow down his tone. And the Quran was emphatic, no. Be stressful, adamant, and deliver what you are supposed to deliver. But the Quran also acknowledged the pain that the Prophet was feeling at those people's denial and obstinate rejection of his message. But the Quran was consoling him. Look, we know what we are doing. Alayk al-balagh, your job is to convey. We will guide. So the Blessed Prophet had all the right credentials inside him to bring about that huge transformation. Now, what was the most pertinent thing about the Prophet that works for the Prophet is that the people saw him. They said, until yesterday, he did not proclaim such things. Today, he is speaking suddenly with a magical tone, rhythmic sounds of such lofty truths that we have not heard from him previously. We have not known him to lie. We have seen him as a man with utmost integrity and truthfulness. So they started wondering, where is it all coming from? 2, they saw a man who himself was not dictating to them the truth and falsehood, but who was actually learning himself. That experience of the Prophet was a very true experience. They are saying, look, he is not here dictating us. It seems that the Quran is teaching him primarily, and through him, we are learning. When the revelation stopped momentarily, and he was perturbed, the surah came. Ma wadda'aka rabbuka wa ma qala. Your Lord has not abandoned you or forsaken you. Now, when he read these verses out, the people said, wow, he is not making it all up. The revelation had paused momentarily, and he was perturbed, and suddenly the revelation has resumed. He himself doesn't know what will happen by tomorrow. He himself is being led. It was a very truthful conveyance of the message. And more than that, the people saw that the message was not in what Muhammad Rasulullah was telling them by his words. The message was how the Prophet himself was interacting and growing through the wahi. That was the real message, his person. He was growing through it gradually and slowly. And the people saw this. Now I know some of the Shia listeners might find this odd, but we find this event about Abasa wa Tawalla and Ja'ahul A'ma, that he was slightly disturbed and he turned away when a blind person came to him. But the context of this event, I just want us to listen to the context of this event, that the Prophet had met one of the chiefs of Mecca, and in his eagerness to convey the message to the chief, so that if the chief converts, with him comes the clan. So the Prophet was seizing that opportunity, and a blind man approaches him. Now, it is a natural human reaction to ask that person who is interrupting or intruding upon the conversation to say to him, wait and pause for a moment, let me finish, and I'll be with you right back. Now, at that point, in his eagerness to convey the message so truthfully, in order to find followers for God, the wahi comes. And what makes you think that he is not clean of heart? And that other one, will you cleanse their heart? Immediately the people hear this and they say, no, he himself is being educated by the Quran. And the Quran is not concerned with multitude of followers. The wahi is simply concerned with awakening the hearts. The wahi is not distinguishing between a chief and a lowly person, between a person who can see and a person whose sight is impaired, between a poor or a rich. Can you imagine how forceful and potent that whole event must have been? So the Prophet humbles himself and recites these verses. Had he wanted, he could have concealed these verses, but he recited them. And people encountered this truthfulness from him, that no, he himself is growing, he himself is learning that God does not want a multitude of people. He wants an untarnished conveyance of his message. When they saw all of these things, their hearts were moved. Now, one of the things that the Prophet had, and he was predisposed to this, and the Quran reinforced it, was forgiveness. You see, in the same verse that I quoted, it says, لو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك فاعف عنهم واستغفر لهم. Then forgive them, pardon them, and seek forgiveness for them. Now, the people, when they awaken from within, if you want to clean the slate, the first thing you do to that person is to tell them that you are not a corrupt, dirty, filthy, tarnished individual. In the sight of God, you are as clean as the day you took birth from your mother's womb. Can you imagine how empowering that can be? He used not only the verses that I'm going to quote in a little while, or I'm going to mention, he used not only rational arguments, but he used something far deeper, a spiritual, emotional remedy. He said to people, no, forget the past. Your God has forgiven you. You are clean slates. Now, I know this from my experiences, multiple experiences, that whenever people embrace Islam, let us say from Hinduism, Sikhism, Christianity, or atheism coming to Islam, you see when they say the Shahada, the elation and joy that they feel, that sense of purity and belonging that they feel. You can see the innocences prevail upon their faces, manifest through their expressions. That is what people need. They need to be told, you're not tarnished. Your God has cleansed you. He loves you. You're a worthy person. Sincere yourself from within and reclaim your right with your God. It's the biggest motivator in the path of the truth. So the Prophet used forgiveness as a constant tool for reformation. He constantly forgave them, constantly forgave them. On occasion, the Sahaba would come to him and they would say, Ya Rasulullah, in your midst, we find a sense of purity. When we are away from you, we become embroiled and engrossed in the matters of this world, and we become tarnished once again. The Blessed Prophet used to smile lovingly, and he would say, is life anything but this? That you seek forgiveness and move a step towards God, and then stop and sometimes move one step back, and then remember God once again? And they would shed tears and cry. It was his merciful touch, his loving, caring nature. Now, how does the Quran train the Prophet and take the community with the Prophet? It is always worth reading the Quran chronologically. You see, the verses talk about warning of the hereafter, accountability. There is a lot going on more than what you have understood. Do you think we have created you in vain and that you shall not be returned to us? That is the thought of the ignorant people. No, there is a grand thing going on. Awaken from within. So the Quran was awakening them from within to allow them to glimpse a greater purpose. Even today, in my own lecturing career, I have noticed we can talk about fiqh, theology, but nothing moves the people more than intrigue. Intrigue that there is more. Isn't there something greater than this? And I often say this to my audience. Do you really feel that we are here to pray and fast and God will reward us or punish us? Can God be so petty? Isn't there something more to that? Isn't there a more glorious state of being that awaits us? And people are intrigued by that. There is something in there. It wants to awaken. It wants to reclaim itself. It wants to know. You know, all our efforts in bettering humanity and fighting for the cause of truth are dwarfed in those moments when somebody reminds us that there is something far loftier than all of this. And the mind is driven into intrigue and into deep reflection. That is what the Quran was doing. There's something far beyond all of this. And I shall say this to us, there is something far beyond this Sunni, Shia constant fight. There is something far beyond Muslim, Christian, theist, atheist debates. There's something far beyond morality and spirituality and virtue. There is something far beyond all of this universe, and there is something far beyond heaven and hell. And you know that. You can feel it in there, that there is something far beyond. So close and yet so far. But you know it in there. So the Prophet reminded them of something that struck a chord in there, deep in there. Then, together with that, he addressed the social ills. He spoke of the care for the orphans, for the widows, rights of women. This was something that appealed to people, but appealed to them in what way? Not only know that morally it's the right thing to do, but they said, no, it is appealing because that is where our inner calling is. Our deeper sense of nobility is saying we should be like this. And then he said to them, your ultimate reward is God himself. The very people who warred and butchered each other now began to sacrifice, now began to purify their hearts of greed and started giving in the name of God to others in order to reclaim their glorious position with God. They began to give rights. The people who sufficed with their daily bread and could not venture beyond Makkah, of course the travelers were coming, into greatest scientists, conquerors of the mighty waves, people who invented optics. Just imagine from where to where. He freed their minds by addressing them here. Social reform was secondary. The primary thing was awakening that thing in there by making them feel worthy. He brought Allah at the helms of their universes. He said, belong with God. What God? Not the Lat and Uzza and Manat. These are the gods that make you superstitious. They make you frightened. They rid you of confidence. No, Allah, the one who says, I will kill you. They were bowing to Lat and Uzza for the sake of sustenance, for the sake of victory over their opponents, for the sake of lengthening their lives. He said, no, Allah, who says that I will give you humility if I want. I will give you dignity if I want. I will give you life if I want. I will give you death if I want. I will give you victory against the kuffar in Medina, he said that. And I will give them victory over you. In Badr, I gave you victory. Now I've given them victory over you. I will kill you if I want. But you will all come to me, and I am the greatest reward. This world is a momentary, illusory place. Imagine what a shift from worshipping gods to extend life to worshipping God who will kill you and says, I will kill you no matter how much you pray to me. If I decide to take you, I will take you. Forget you, I will take Muhammad Rasulullah himself. And if I kill him and take him to me, will you run away again? Can you imagine the way they are being addressed? So they saw so much from the Prophet. It was so revolutionary, the experience. I just want to say this, that a Bedouin would come to Muhammad Rasulullah with a heart full of hatred. He would look at him and he would say, this is not the face of a liar. This cannot be the face of a liar. His humility, his love, his care. What have we done to the message of the Prophet? Look at us. Swearing at each other, cursing at each other in the name of the Prophet. Really? The blessed Prophet said to the human community, come to the word of God shared equally amongst us. Let us worship together one God. What a man he was, and where are we today? You know, the Quran doesn't even care less about Islam, Judaism, Christianity. He puts them all on the same pedestal. Look at the Islam of Prophet Muhammad. In Surah Imran or Nisa or Maida, I don't know. It's not your wishful thinking or the wishful thinking of people of the book. I think it's one of the later surahs. It could be Maida. He said, whoever does bad will receive bad. Whoever does good will receive good. Then you know how the Quran is rooting the whole of this issue? He said, because you are following the Millah of Ibrahim. I don't want to talk about Prophet Muhammad, Prophet Isa, or Prophet Musa. Forget. I'm going back to Ibrahim, the monotheist. Imagine the broadness of this message. In Surah Baqarah, on so many occasions, the Quran does not mention any faith. It just says, turn to God and be muhsin, and He will give you your reward. Look at the broadness of this man. Look at the broadness of his message. And look at his lived experience and how he was growing. Now, I know I have to finish. My time is running away. But I want to mention one thing. Read the Quran carefully. Prophet Muhammad's metal is the thing that drove the message. And you know why it was such a true message? Because he did not know what will transpire tomorrow. You can see, if you read the Quran chronologically, how the Prophet Muhammad was increasing in his confidence, in his decision making. He grew with the experience. The Quran nurtured him. They asked Lady Aisha, who was a teacher of the Quran, and she said, who was a teacher of the Prophet, and she said, the Quran was a teacher and the nurturer of the Prophet. By Quran, she means obviously the divine. The divine nurtured the Prophet. The divine taught him the right way. The divine brought and instilled confidence in his soul. But the way he grew, look at this and read these verses again and again and reflect upon them. O Muhammad, we shall either take you or we shall either show you what we have promised to do to them. So the Prophet Muhammad does not know how long his tenure is or whether he will be allowed to deliver the message completely. The Prophet Muhammad did not know when the message will be completed and which surah will be the final one. إِمَّا نُرِيَنَّكَ بَعْضَ مَا نَعِدَهُمْ أَوْ نَتَوَفَّيَنَّكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Either we will show you some of what we have promised to do to them, or we will kill you before that, O Muhammad. Look at the Quran. The Prophet Muhammad is on knife's edge. He said, this is the command of God. I shall do the right thing, even if death comes upon me. He had no guarantee from one day to another that he would live through the next day. He had no guarantee that he will win any battle. He had no guarantee that God will not change his decision at any given point. And this was the true experience, and the man stands firm with resolve in Allah, come what may. Even if I'm killed, even if Islam is not delivered, even if God replaces Islam with something else. He conveyed his message. And he was truthful. And he was truthful. I will say this much. The verses, لَيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ and mushrikun, these verses come in the later surahs. It's not in the first surahs that he will cause his deen to prevail upon all other deen. The Prophet Muhammad may not have known that his missionary role will culminate so gloriously that it will prevail upon all deen. He was just doing his work. And he did it so phenomenally. And his work was not reading the Quran. His work was living the Quran. And the Quran did not make him the moral, caring, loving person that he was. That was the quality of the Prophet Muhammad, due to which he was the messenger, due to which he was chosen as the messenger. This is to his merit, this great man. That is to his merit. And then obviously the Quran nurtures him. And at the end of his life, we see him, not the end, even in the phase of Makkah, we see him totally effaced in Allah. Totally effaced in Allah. Total reliance upon Allah. Have you seen a man of this stature? with so much power, and his power was increasing as the expeditions were getting more and more successful in Medina, as more and more people were flocking to his message because it was a new status quo that he was setting up. But as humble, staying hungry, forgiving his enemies, receiving taunts and swears. I mean, imagine the Quran has to tell him, Muhammad, don't do this. Even if you stand at their grave, seek forgiveness for them 17 times, God will not forgive them. But the Prophet was standing. Just see what this man was. Just see what he was. Without lust for power or for wealth or for revenge. They come to him at the conquest of Makkah. He says, you're all forgiven. Look at how this man was. There is no superiority over an Arab, for an Arab over a non-Arab. Rich over poor, black over white. Imagine. What sort of a man was he? He was totally cleansed of his human frailties. He shone with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will say this as I finish this khutbah, and I'll just go through a few points in the next khutbah. I will say this. The world today needs Muhammad Rasulullah. And I am not saying this. I have read from the words of the Orientalists that if anybody can bring sanity to this world, is one like Muhammad Rasulullah. He goes to that place and shifts it. My God, my God. We have not seen a man like this tread upon the face of this earth. It is only when I see the likes of Muhammad Rasulullah that I feel, even though I don't think the statement is accurate, that insan is ashraful makhluqat, that we are the best of God's creations. But when I see a man like him, I say, yeah, maybe we are the best of God's creations in all of the multiverses put together, if there is one like him. Can we pray Surah Fatiha for my dear grandma? And then we've arranged the niyaz after Juma, so please don't go away. We will have niyaz together. Our dear grandma Maryam Bai Ismail Bata, and dear brother and auntie and uncle and sister, and all our beloved marhumin and all the marhumin of our human family. Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Just very briefly, you see, our Islamic states need to model themselves on the attitude and outlook of the Blessed Prophet Muhammad. The Blessed Prophet Muhammad was against warfare, was against coercion, like Raha fi Din, was against the principle of human dignity and human nobility. This is how we need to model our politics, our social structures. If we can do that, then maybe we can ensure prosperity for our people. I do not feel any Islamic state is following the modelship of the Blessed Prophet. I do not feel that religious leadership is modeled around the Blessed Prophet's sense of accountability and understanding and having that outlook, societal outlook that the Blessed Prophet had. It is high time We reverted to the example of Prophet Muhammad within the religious hierarchy, within the Islamic governments. And through that, extend hand of friendship to other religions and other regions of the world to try and make good our human community. Oh, sorry, I forgot there is a person going through a surgery right now. Let us pray Fatiha for his shafa. And the other thing I want to say is just two more things, but the other thing that the preachers are doing so much damage from the pulpits. And when you see the crowds that gather and the way they respond to this preaching, you are left with hopelessness. You think, no, there's no way that the situation can improve, not within my lifetime at least. Instead of discussing the huge contributions of the Prophet, the virtues of the prophets, the morality of the Prophet, the ethos of the Prophet, the essence in the prophetic conduct and decisions, we are talking about who cut the heart of the Prophet and that Sunnis are saying it and Shias are not saying it. Why don't we have integrity to say the Shias have already narrated this incident as well with the Sunnis? Shias are also narrating this incident. Is this what we sit upon the pulpit and say? Sunni Shia bashing? The preachers are the biggest cause for the ignorance and stagnation of our communities. Pulpit is our first source of knowledge, but the people adorning the pulpit are either uneducated or are people who lack total integrity. This is something that the community needs to take on board very, very seriously. If we can all encourage ourselves to read about the Blessed Prophet, so when these preachers come, stop them. Tell them these are lies, or maybe your education is not good enough. Go and read a bit more. In any case, if the public reads and gets acquainted, they can sort out the preachers, because the preachers will tend wherever the public is tending, because that is their bread and butter. It's unfortunate. That's the way, that is the truth of the matter. Even the religious hierarchy will just ordain things that the public want in order to stay in control. Nah, this has to change. It has to change. Look at how damned we've become and condemned we have become. Look at our state. The Blessed Prophet, I want to quote Sunni Shia sources, after delivering the final sort of surah, Hazrat Jibreel comes to him and he says that your Lord calls you to himself. You have delivered the message. But you may choose to stay back and see the culmination of your message and reap the fruits of your labor. And still, God will not diminish your reward that He has for you. So he narrated this incident to his family. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, and what did you choose? He said, I have chosen to go back. I have been alienated from my Lord, as if to say, I want to go back home. Look at a man who has done so much, sacrificed so much. And now when the time comes for him to reap the rewards of his labor and still not diminish any of his reward, he says, no, I want to go back to my God. That's where I belong. That is Muhammad Rasulullah. From a Shia source, when the angel extracts his soul, he says, O angel, ease a little, for indeed it is unbearable, the pangs of extraction of the soul. The angel says, O dear Prophet, this is the least amount of pain that a dying man shall encounter. He said, in that case, give me the sum total of all the pains until the day of Qiyamah that are going to come upon my ummah. so that nobody else has to endure this pain after me. That is the caring, fatherly nature of the Prophet. Sunni riwayah, on the day of Qiyamah, with al-Jahim su'irat, when the hell is kindled, it is said that every prophet will observe, and in a state of panic shall tremble and say, Allahumma nafsi, nafsi. Oh Allah, save me, save me. But only one person will be seen there who will say, Oh Lord, save my people. And a final riwayah, when the angels awaken him, he will sit in his grave and shake off the dust from his shroud, and he will say, Jibreel, what day is this? And they will say, it's the appointed hour. The Prophet will look at Jibreel and say, and what have you done with my ummah? And Jibreel will say, O Messenger, God will be true to his promise to you. You are the first one to be resurrected, and you will intercede for all of them. Such is our dearest, blessed Prophet. May Allah cause us to live in his love, and may Allah cause us to die in his love. May Allah bless the blessed Prophet, his brothers that have gone before him, and his noble, impeccable family. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammadin al-Mustafa wa ala aliyin al-Murtada wa ala Fatimat al-Zahra wa ala al-Hasan al-Mujtaba wal Hussein al-Shahid bi Karbala wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa Muhammad ibn Ali wa Ja'far ibn Muhammad wa Musa ibn Ja'far wa Ali ibn Musa wa Muhammad ibn Ali wa Ali ibn Muhammad wa al-Hasan ibn Ali wa Hujjatullah ibn al-Hasan al-Qa'im al-Mahdi al-Muntadhar. Allahumma ajil faraja wa sahil makharaja waj'alna min ansarihi wa a'wani wal mustashhadin bayna yaday. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad.